3, 2, and 1. We should be live from Facebook if Zoom is working, which I trust it is. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Street Entrepreneurs Workshop. Today, we have the privilege of having Claudia Herrera from DCRA, who's going to talk to us about how to start a business in DC. We always get a lot of questions about, do I get an LLC? Do I get a C Corp? Do I get a B Corp? What are all the classifications, the different business license types? Do I need a home occupancy certificate? All those questions and more will be answered for you today. So thank you so much, Claudia, for being here with us.
You're welcome. Thank you all for having me. Again, my name is Claudia Herrera. I work at the Department of Consumer and Regulatory Affairs Small Business Resource Center. Should I just get started with the presentation part?
Yes, that would be great.
All right, just wanted to make sure. Are you able to see my screen?
Perfect.
Okay. So I am a business resource center specialist at the Department of Consumer and Regulatory Affairs. And today what I'm going to do is go over our regulatory process of establishing your business in DC. So a little bit about what the Small Business Resource Center does. We're a one-stop shop where we assist customers when they're in the process of establishing their business in DC, whether they be new, existing, and trying to grow their business. We're here to help customers with those needs. We provide free one-on-one assistance through that regulatory process, and also group sessions like the one that you all are a part of today to assist you. We help with registration, permitting, and licensing for your business. We also have an array of different different partnerships around the city. These partnerships are with different nonprofit organizations and also different government agencies to help you along with your business needs. This could be for business planning, financing for your business, legal assistance. We have an array of different partnerships around the city to include also street entrepreneurs to help you with your business. So the first step is to register your business. You would need to decide what type of registration you want to do for your business. If you want to be a corporate entity, that would be your first step. A corporate entity consists of various structures. So you can be an LLC, you can be a type of corporation, you can be a general partnership, limited liability. It just all depends on what type of corporate structure you choose if you want to be a corporate entity. And that would be your first step, would be to register with the various corporations division. If you don't want to have a corporate entity for your business and you just want to be a sole proprietorship and register a name for your business, then that's where you would do the trade name registration. The trade name registration allows you to advertise and provide services for your business, but it's not linked to a corporate entity. So going back, when it comes to a corporate registration, the fee for corporate is $220 versus just to register a name for your business is $55. And both are done with our corporations division. The second step is to register with the Internal Revenue Service. From the IRS, what you'll obtain is called an EIN number, which is an employer identification number. There's no fee to obtain this number through the IRS. If you're doing it as part of a corporate entity, what they'll do is issue you an EIN number. If you want to have it linked to your personal assets and you're doing a sole proprietorship and you don't want to be issued an actual EIN number, you can always use your social security number as far as your sole proprietorship endeavor. Once you register with the IRS, that registration needs to be fulfilled with the DC Office of Tax and Revenue. And what you're going to be doing with them is a notice of business tax registration. This is so you can be in compliance with the IRS and also locally with DC Office of Tax and Revenue. Another thing that you'll have to complete with DC will be the Clean Hand certification. This certification is a document, an affidavit that we verify that you do not owe more than $100 to the District of Columbia. This can be in fines, penalties, fees, violations, tickets, taxes. Anything that's owed to DC cannot exceed $100. If for whatever reason it does, you'll need to bring it under $100 or pay it off, or you can get on a payment plan with DC Office of Tax and Revenue. The third step is to register with the Office of Zoning Administrator. So depending on where the location of the actual business will be, will determine where you fall into our permitting process. If you're performing your business out of a commercial space, it falls under the certificate of occupancy. The certificate of occupancy is usually tied to a brick and mortar location. So if you're not making any updates or changes to the actual existing property, or you may just be using the property as like an office space, we would just need to see a copy of that certificate of occupancy along with a copy of the leasing agreement. But if you live in DC and you want to use your home as like your home-based office, you can apply for what's called a home occupation permit. It's a one-time fee for the permit of $72.60, and it allows you to use your home for the purposes of your office. As long as you're not using more than 35% of the square footage, you fall under the HOP category. You can also apply for the home occupation permit at the time that you're applying for the actual basic business license. We call this process expedited home occupation permit. The reason it's called expedited is because they issue the permit simultaneously when you're applying for the actual basic business license at no extra fee, which leads me into step 4, applying for the actual basic business license application. We have over 12 different categories with over 165 different endorsements. So depending on the type of business that you have will dictate what type of endorsement or category that you fall under, whether it be business, construction, general services, food related. Most licenses, if not all, fall under DCRA. If you need additional certifications or licensing, they may fall under either DC Health, Alcohol Beverage Regulation Administration, or possibly the Washington Area Metropolitan Transit Commission. So it just all depends on the actual business activity that you're performing, will dictate how you proceed in step 4. Currently right now, as many of you all know, our offices are currently closed. So the way we've been doing all of our sessions and workshops have been either through webinar or by phone. Our main line is still working. We have a representative that answers that and triages it to the different specialists. Again, my name is Claudia Herrera. I am available via email, as you see on the screen. Please feel free to email me at any time. I do answer. We also have our registration page, which is dcra.svrc.ecenterdirect.com. That's where you can go to register for either a one-on-one session or a group webinar. All of our sessions and webinars are free to customers, no matter where you are. But all of the information is related to DC. Any questions?
So I should mention that if you have any questions, you can send them to the Street Entrepreneurs Messenger, and I will be monitoring that and passing questions on to Claudia. And we do have some questions. So the first one is, I am working from home and I'm starting a food business. Do I need different types of licenses?
So currently under DC regulations, we aren't allowing food-based businesses from home unless they fall under the cottage law. The cottage law only allows you to have baked goods from your home, and they without the requirement of them being refrigerated, and they can only be baked items. They can't be other food related items, and the regulations have to be approved through DC Health's cottage law program. So right now they're doing it on a case-by-case basis because that particular program is geared towards people that don't work in commercial kitchens and wish to work from home. So if it falls under baking goods, they can definitely pursue that cottage law, but for regular food items, they wouldn't be able to do it from home. They would have to find a commercial kitchen that they can work out of, and then we would need to see a copy of the certificate of occupancy, a copy of the leasing agreement, and also a health inspection report from DC Health.
Awesome. Are there any COVID-19 exceptions?
No, unfortunately not, no.
Can I operate a business without a license?
No. So the reason I say no like that is because a lot of times when entrepreneurs try to do their business and think that they'll fly under the radar, we do have investigators that go out and they perform investigations on different types of businesses, whether they be brick and mortar or whether it be a type of entrepreneur that goes to the actual consumer. Where if they find that you're not in compliance with DC regulations, they can issue you a fine. Most times that fine is greater than the registration and the licensing process. And the registration and licensing lasts for much longer than to pay that one-time fine, because they can fine you multiple times for the same thing, but you only have to pay one time for the registration and then just keep up the renewal. And then also, most licenses are either for 2 years or 4 years. So I always tell people it's just not worth it.
Awesome. Um, can you talk a little bit about the different types of corporate entities and what the pros and benefits are? How might someone go about deciding which corporate entity is right for them?
So usually when it comes to deciding the type of corporate structure one wants to choose, we usually refer them to legal counsel. The reason being is because we can advise a business on which structure is best for them. And that's why we do have a partnership with the DC Bar Pro Bono Center. They offer free one-on-one legal advice assistance.
Can you talk broadly about the difference between the different corporate entities?
So there are some advantages and disadvantages to each of them. Most of them are for tax purposes. A lot of them are for if you have several members within your actual entity itself, or if you're just a sole member and you're starting out. The most popular one that people usually go after is LLC, which is limited liability corporation. That one is the one that also most attorneys tell entrepreneurs to do, because that one falls in line with a lot of the businesses that are registered in DC.
Awesome. Um, and if you guys are watching and you have any follow-up questions, you can always ask. I'm chatting with someone, so um, anyways, um, I'm not making a lot of money. Can I operate as a sole proprietor? So I think what this person's trying to ask is there an income limit? So like, let's say you're making under 20,000, maybe even under 10,000. Are you still required to get a business license?
Yes. So usually the rule of thumb is no matter what amount of money that you're making, as long as you're making some sort of income and it's business related, then you must be properly registered, permitted, and licensed.
Okay. Here's a follow-up question. What if the amount that I'm making is below the the cost of the business license? Is there a subsidy that entrepreneurs can access to apply for a business license, or a type of license that is temporary, perhaps cheaper even, so they can test out their business ideas in a regulated environment?
Unfortunately, there isn't. So oftentimes we let entrepreneurs know to keep in mind that even when it comes to formulating a good business plan, you're putting in there the cost that you have to do when it comes to state regulations. That's with us, that's with IRS, that's with DC Office of Tax and Revenue, because you also still will have to pay taxes to both of those entities. You'll have to keep up with your renewals with us. So, and the reason that there isn't like a startup, for lack of better words, a startup licensing category is because each licensing category has different requirements. So, for example, if a person is just doing general sales and they're just providing a service, like let's say they're a consultant or they are just selling t shirts, hats, merchandise, things of that nature, they do fall under the general business licensing category. But if they're doing something like construction related, That may fall under either general contractor or home improvement contractor, just all depending if they're working on residential or commercial based services. And that falls under different requirement categories. They'll need a police criminal history report, they'll need liability insurance, sometimes they'll need a copy of their surety bond. So each licensing endorsement is specified to the actual activity that the business is performing. So that's why we can't have just like a startup one, because some licensing categories have different requirements that go along with the application.
Understood. So this question comes from actually one of our entrepreneurs in the makers cohort. So, what if you have a Teespring account or an Etsy account? Do you still need to have a business license in DC?
Yes. Usually, a lot of times, what I tell customers is that that's just a platform that's used to advertise or like put your product online. But you're still the business owner. You still have a name for your business. You still need to comply with registration requirements, which will ultimately mean that you will need a valid license for the business.
Awesome. Do people working in DC at home for a company based out of the district need their own license? Actually, the person who sent this in, can you clarify and provide more details if you can? Are you a contractor working for the company or are you employed by the company? And Claudia, if you have more questions.
So, if it's the latter part, if you work for a company, then that company needs to be properly registered and licensed. But if you're a contractor for that company, then you need to be properly registered, permitted, and licensed. If that's the scenario.
Awesome. Home occupancy permit rather than the license.
So, what was the original question?
Do people working in DC at home for a company based out of the district need their own home occupancy permit?
Yes. Mm-hmm. If you're using your home for the purposes of office space, then you do need a home occupation permit.
Claudia, what if you are leasing from an apartment building that does not allow you to conduct business out of your apartment?
Mm-hmm. So we get this question asked a lot. We can't interfere on how the landlord does business with the tenant. If they have that in their lease that they do not want people to have businesses run out of their home, then there's nothing that we can do, because we can still issue the permit, but we're not held liable if the landlord comes back and says that you cannot operate your business from home.
Is there an alternative? Is there maybe a if your business is really run out of a computer, right? Let's say you're a consultant, all you need is Wi-Fi and a computer. Can you get a hotspot kind of home occupancy, quote unquote home occupancy?
Unfortunately, not, because the home occupancy permit is tied to the person's address. So there, that has to be their actual resident address. They can't use someone else's address. If they're using another address, it has to be a commercial based address.
Got it. Here's another question. Can you use this service if your business is not based in DC?
Yes. So a lot of times people register, permit, and license their business in DC because they're doing business with DC. But if you're not doing any type of business in DC, then there's no point to actually, get a license in DC. But you don't have to be based here or have a location here.
Austin, can you clarify a little bit what you mean by the service? Are you referring to the DCRA service or
No, so when it comes to the service, it might be the product that they're selling, whether it be merchandise, whether it be food, whether it be their construction services, if they're renting cars. I don't know. It depends on what activity that they're doing. If that activity is being done in the District of Columbia, then they do need to be properly licensed through us. But if they're not doing it in DC, then they don't need to do anything with us.
Awesome. Yeah, I was trying to clarify with the person who asked the question, because I'm sensing that perhaps the service you're referring to is the customer service that DCRA provides as you're figuring out license types and the one-on-one kind of workshops and classes and calls and such. So if someone is thinking about, let's say someone is doing business in Maryland and they're thinking about doing business in DC, can they still attend the workshops and contact the service center?
Oh yes, definitely. Just if they're not doing anything related to like activity in DC, then they would just not fall under our regulatory process, but they can still definitely take advantage of all of our workshops and webinars.
Awesome. Um, what is the most common question you get?
Do I have to get a license? And my thing is, if you're receiving monies for the activity that you're doing, then yes.
Okay. What is the second most common question you get?
Do we have any waivers or like the question that you asked earlier, any like less funded, cheaper licenses? No, all of our licenses have a set fee. There's no way to make them more cost effective or waive any fees.
Awesome. And the third.
Uh, what license do I need? That's why we split up all of our licensing categories into 12 different categories, because we do have over 165 different endorsements. So it just all depends on the business activity that they're doing, that we will let them know what type of licensing requirements they'll need.
Okay. Awesome. Here's another question we got. Can you backtrack? If you didn't get a license um 2 years ago, can you can you backtrack? Can you get a license now and not be held liable for the past 2 years?
Yes. So as long as you, I mean, for lack of better words, not gotten caught, you definitely can now come into compliance. Because one thing that we would like most entrepreneurs to do, if not all of them, is to be in compliance with our regulations, because that's why we do have an enforcement division for people that are not in compliance. So we want you to avoid those fines. We don't want to issue you any fines, but a lot of times, that's what our investigators have to do when the entrepreneur is not coming into compliance.
Mm. So, here's a question. I'm an entrepreneur selling art. I'm a street vendor. What type of license do I need?
So for a street vendor, that does fall under our vending division. And currently, right now, I think that they aren't issuing anymore when it comes to sidewalk vending. That's the licensing category. The reason I say that I believe that they aren't anymore was because before the pandemic, we did not have any more space available, because a lot of our vendors are like on the sidewalk. That's why it's called sidewalk vending. And just to preserve the safety of people walking on the sidewalk, we can't occupy all of the sidewalks in the District of Columbia. So what ended up happening was that since we have so many entrepreneurs that want to do it, we've run out of space. I think that that's still going on right now, but if it's not, then that specific person would fall under a sidewalk permit. And usually what happens is that if a person is caught being on a sidewalk selling um, their goods, the police will issue them a ticket.
Wow.
So we don't want that to happen if
Of
it has not
course not.
happened.
Um, I have a question for you. So, um, a while back, I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs experiencing homelessness who have the grit and drive to really just start businesses with what they have, right? Which sometimes it's $5 to buy waters and upsell them in the National Mall, you know? And I personally, as Juliana Cardona, not speaking on behalf of street entrepreneurs, but I have so much respect for that, because here's someone who's taking the little they have and trying to make money to get themselves into a better circumstance, whether that is housing or food or whatever it is to get them to the next step. And sometimes that next step is stable employment. Um, let's say you're in that situation. What recourse do you have? I mean, you have 20 bucks. You're just trying to make some money to get out of the streets. You certainly cannot afford a license, let alone housing. Is there any exception that you can quote so that the police don't take your goods away and issue you a ticket? I mean, you don't even have an address where they can send a ticket. I mean, is there something? Is there
Unfortunately, there is not. Uh, I feel myself personally for those people. I wish that there was something I can do, but these regulations have been put in place for years now, and they're approved by our city council. So a lot of times when they think that it's us telling them we can't do something, this is what council approved, and this is what we're just the regulatory agency that enforces what was approved by city council. So, and also to go back to the part where you said selling on the National Mall, that's federal property. So we have no jurisdiction on federal property. Only the federal government does. So that's where that type of policing will get involved. And we don't have any recourse or any terminology to say, we'll tell the police this so they won't stop you or take away anything from you.
of course. So here's another question. Are there certain sidewalks that you can be on?
So that goes back to my original point when it comes to the sidewalk vending. Currently, right now, pre-pandemic, we ran out of space. So
Yep.
if there is any spacing available, we do have a map on our website, which is dcra.dc.gov, under our vending division that gives a map of the entire city. And if there is any sidewalk that's available, it'll show on that map. So only because there is a sidewalk that a person might see visibly available doesn't mean that it's under the regulations of DC to actually vend from that location. And especially if it's in a residential area.
Of course. Here's another question. I am trying to sell ice cream in the National Mall. What license do I need and where do I get it?
So a person can't sell ice cream at the National
So I
Mall because
believe this is like it is a truck, like a food truck, kind of situation.
so when it comes to our mobile roadway vending regulations, that still fall under our vending division. So first of all, the actual truck will need to meet the criteria of size measurements and also what's inside of it. And the people that perform that inspection is our agency, Department of Consumer Regulatory Affairs, DC Health, fire and emergency medical services. These three disciplines and or agencies are the ones that come together and perform an inspection on the truck and make sure that it has everything interior wise and also meets the certain specifications as far as sizing. Now, if you get approved and have a valid inspection, you can apply for the mobile roadway vending license and just fall under the class that's for selling ice cream. And when it comes to where that person can vend from, they can only be parked at an actual legal parking space. So it has to be a parking space where they have to pay a meter and they actually have to pay that meter as well. They can't be in spaces where it says no parking. And they can also not be in residential areas. If they are, they actually can stop if there's a crowd that's coming towards the ice cream truck. But once everyone's gone, they have to keep going.
Wow. Okay. Is there an extra cost for the inspection, for the vehicle inspection?
I believe there isn't. I think it's all included in the actual license.
You're like an encyclopedia. This is so impressive. It kind of reminds me of the Friends episode where Joey could
I
only
love
afford
Joey.
one letter, so he just memorized everything with B. Anyways, sorry.
Okay.
Total side note. So here's another question. if you start a business license as a sole proprietor, and you change to an LLC, do you have to start the business license process over again and get a new one, or is there a change the license process? Also, if you have an LLC and then have sub businesses under the LLC, do you need to get a business license for each one?
So to address the first question, yes, you will need to get a new basic business license if you're going from a sole proprietorship to an actual corporate entity. To address the second part of your question, um, if you have different businesses underneath that same business, but they all are in line with the same type of activity, let's say, for instance, one business is selling books, the other one is selling t shirts, the other one is selling maybe hair products. Those all fall under general services. So they will still classify under that one general business license as long as the business premise address remains the same. But if you have multiple business addresses, then you will need multiple licenses for each business address. Or if you have different business activities, because you have a car repair shop under one, a beauty salon, and then also be selling t-shirts. Those are three different activities that require three different licensing categories.
Awesome. Is there some place to find fines for non-compliance posted?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Is there a place to find fines for non-compliance posted? So I believe this is referring to the Clean Hands certificate.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how might someone go about inquiring about their
Their
status?
status.
Yeah.
So that's handled through the DC Office of Tax and Revenue. They would definitely, the first step that they would do would be creating an account through the Tax and Revenue portal on mytax.dc.gov. And that's where they can check their personal status and see if they actually owe any dues to the city.
Okay. Here's another question. I'm going to people's houses and giving them a massage. I'm a massage therapist. What type of license do I need?
So that falls under our general business licensing category. As long as they're going to the actual customer's home and not doing it from their home, they qualify under the general business licensing category.
Would that person still need a home occupancy permit for
Yes.
massage? Okay,
Mhm.
understood. And if someone's braiding hair or putting eyelashes or doing makeup, would it be the same deal?
As long as they're going to that person's home
Okay,
and
and
doing
if
those
they're
services.
doing it from their home,
So they can possibly do the eyelash and makeup part from their home, but when it comes to hair, they definitely have to check with DC Health because when it comes to beauty, that falls under our professional licensing administration and also DC Health requirements.
awesome. Another question. I am a caterer selling food at church. What kind of licensing do I need?
Is the food being cooked at the church? And if it is, the church has its own commercial license. They have their own commercial permit for the kitchen that they have because churches are considered like kind of commercial establishments. So the kitchen that they have within the church qualifies for a commercial kitchen. So as long as they're cooking from the church and they're selling from the church, they can fall in line with the category of catering license as long as they get a valid health inspection on their own from DC Health.
If the church gets a valid health inspection, right? Or
Well, the church already has to have their own, but the person that's going to be doing the catering services has to schedule an inspection with DC Health to get one under their business.
and if they're cooking from their home,
They can't cook from their home. That goes back to my previous part where no food can be cooked from home at all. No
unless
exception.
it's baked goods.
It can be some baked goods as long as it falls under the cottage law. And as I mentioned before, that goes under the regulations of DC Health. And right now they're doing it on a case by case basis. From what I know, when it comes to the baked goods, they have to be baked goods that don't require refrigeration and that are sold immediately.
Is it possible for someone to turn their home kitchen into a commercial kitchen?
No.
Okay. Just thought I'd try.
That's easy.
um, what is the funniest loophole you've heard from someone?
I don't want to say.
Okay, true. We won't leave. We'll leave that. Okay. Here's a. Let me go back and check the groups for more questions. If you owe more than $100, what kind of payment plans are available?
That would be coordinated with DC Office of Tax and Revenue. But I know that a person can be put on a payment plan.
And if you're putting on a payment plan, you can then apply for a business license.
Yes. They just have to show us proof that they're on the payment plan.
Awesome. If you're handling food, what additional licenses do you need?
So it depends on where they're preparing the food. If they're preparing the food out of well, they have to prepare it out of a commercial kitchen.
Right.
So they will just need the type of licensing category depending on the type of food that they're cooking. So if they're doing just regular food, that falls in line with catering. If they're doing baked goods, then that would be a baker's license. But when it comes to certifications, they will still need the proper certifications from DC Health. This is a clean, I'm not clean, I'm sorry. What is it called?
Food
It's
handlers.
food handlers. Yes, thank you. So it's the food handler certification, and they will also need a food managers since they're the actual owner of the actual business itself. They'll need the manager one and just the food handlers certification, but that goes through DC Health. So it's not an actual license, it's a certification.
Awesome. Okay, here's another question. So I live in DC and my business address is in DC, but I have a contract with DC government. Does this mean I need a DC license as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Any business that's doing business with DC does have to be properly licensed in DC. I always say if you're getting income from us, regardless of whether it be a consumer or a business, you have to be licensed.
You're paying us. The government is a silent business partner. The thing is,
Yeah.
like, it comes in threes. In threes. Sorry, I still count with my threes. I've been in this country since I was 9 and still three. Three. Okay, this number. There's the federal government, the local government, the state government. They're all silent partners taking a dip. Yay. This is why you have to vote, guys. Uh, Again, private citizen Juliana here. But moving on to next question. Um, I'm a dog groomer. Is that a general business license?
If the services are being provided at the customer's home, yes, because they can't do that business activity from their home.
Is there any case where if you are providing the service at the person's home, um, or the customer's home, where it wouldn't fall into a general business category?
Not necessarily, no, because even when it's food related, let's say if you're providing personal cooking services for a couple, they're celebrating their anniversary. The person, if they're just doing that, then the entrepreneur can just get a general business license because they're just providing a service, even though it's food related.
Okay. Um, this one's really random, but I'm gonna ask it anyways. Okay, I'm just gonna summarize it. It's kind of long. So this person is a private limousine driver, but they also drive for Uber, right? And he's wondering why he doesn't need a business license for Uber, but he needs one to drive his own limousine business.
So when it comes to the Uber concept, Uber already has their registration and licensing from us. You're essentially just an employee for Uber. So since you're an employee, you're not the actual entrepreneur. Even though you're the one providing the driving services, you're not an entrepreneur because you're an employee for Uber. When it comes to the limousine service, that falls under the Washington Area Transit Commission, and the licensing would go through them, but the registration would still go through us. And that's a business that you're doing on your own, where you don't report to someone, you're your own boss.
Okay, I'm an undocumented entrepreneur. How do I go about getting a business license?
So it would still be that same process that we went through in the PowerPoint presentation, from registration with corporations, registering for an EIN with IRS, then registering that EIN with DC Office of Tax and Revenue, fulfilling the zoning requirements, whether you're in a commercial establishment or you're working from home if you are a DC resident. And then depending on the type of activity that you're performing will dictate which of the 12 categories you'll be licensed under.
Can you obtain an EIN without a social security number?
So that's a question for IRS and DC Office of Tax and Revenue.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you so much, Claudia.
Yeah.
Um, we have a couple minutes, and I just wanted to give you a time to just share your vast knowledge and just general tips or advice for entrepreneurs who are doing business in DC.
So unfortunately, I would love to, but I can't give any advice as a public servant. But one thing that I always urge customers is to take advantage of our services. Our services are free, whether it be a one-on-one session with one of our specialists or one of our counselors, which we have various partnerships with. Whether you need help with business planning, um, finding financing for your business, if you need legal assistance, if you needed help with finding insurance for your business. We have different partnerships around the city that are for-profit and nonprofit organizations. So definitely take advantage of everything we have to offer. And always, if you don't know something, ask. We always love people to ask first before they actually start the process. Because if you're unsure of what you're about to get into and then you do a registration wrong, most times our agency can't get you out of that bind. You either would have to re-register, pay different fees or not fines, but different amendment fees possibly when it comes to corporate registration, or if they registered and licensed for the wrong business, then they would have to cancel that license and pay for a whole new license all over again. So definitely, if you ever have any questions, please feel free to reach out to our office.
Awesome. Just one more question. Last one. I'm a nonprofit, but I have earned revenue. Do I need a charitable solicitation and a general business license?
Can you repeat the question one more time?
So they are a nonprofit, but they also have earned revenue. So I know this business. They
How did they
do
earn the revenue? Was it through donations?
not through donations. So I guess the question is like, in addition to the charitable solicitation license that they already have, do they need a general business license?
So if it all depends on how they're it all depends on the actual activity that they're performing when it comes to the actual I'm sorry, I got distracted. It just all depends on the actual activity. Let's say, for instance, they're selling a book. If they're selling a book and they're accepting revenue for that, then they do need to be properly licensed. But if they're just accepting donations on behalf of the nonprofit itself, then it still falls in line with the charitable solicitation license. And I actually had a question like this earlier today, where a nonprofit, they want to make they wanted to make some revenue off the book. So I let them know that they couldn't sell the book, but they could give the book away and then accept a donation for it. The caveat with that is that they can't put a price on what the person can donate. So, but if they are accepting income for the actual service or product that they're selling, then they do have to be licensed as a for-profit business.
Got it. Um, wow, you this just opened a can of worms. Now I'm getting a lot of questions regarding the marijuana a donation. Uh,
Yeah, I had someone that asked me about that earlier today.
do you want to
So
talk
when it
about that briefly?
So when it comes to Initiative 71, all regulation and all certification goes through DC Health. If DC Health approves you for the type of idea that you have under Initiative 71, they dictate to you what process you have to do with us. So A lot of times, what I've been seeing is that people are giving away the cannabis as a gift, but then they're receiving donations on the back end. And it's really not a donation when the person is actually paying for the cannabis. So I always just tell customers or entrepreneurs to be very careful with that, to definitely follow the regulations under Initiative 71, that if they're actually just giving it away as a gift, to actually mean that they're doing that part. But again, those regulations fall under DC Health.
Okay. So if someone were to be selling stickers, for instance, in exchange for gifts, um,
So they can sell the sticker. So let's say they had like a hand sanitizer. They're selling the hand sanitizer, and then I'm giving them $3 for the hand sanitizer. Then in return, they can give me cannabis, but that is just, they're giving me cannabis. They're not telling me how much I have to pay for the cannabis. They're giving it to me literally as a gift.
got it. Okay,
But
beautiful.
again, all of these regulations fall under DC Health.
Okay. So in addition to the, corporate entity and the licensing with this particular agency, and of course tax and revenue, um, which types of businesses need to also be in contact with DC Health? It's food, from what I understand, beauty.
Mhm.
Is there any other type of industry that will also require additional certifications from other DC government agencies?
Alcohol, even though alcohol is regulated under Alcohol Beverage Regulation Administration, it still also falls in line with DC Health, because of where the facility will be, where the actual product will be sold out of. It's mainly food and hair services.
Okay. Um, so okay, sorry, I just thought of something. If someone is operating a food business, I actually see this quite a bit. Uh, can they get a, co-working situation to fulfill the requirement of commercial kitchen space?
Yes. So that there are a lot of commercial kitchens around the city that are shared kitchen spaces, and they have their proper registration, permitting, and licensing through us. We just need to see a copy of that certificate of occupancy, and then the person that's doing the food service has to get their own health inspection from DC Health. Even though the actual facility might have one that's valid, the actual business owner will need to get their own from DC Health. And then we would also need to see a copy of the leasing agreement.
Got it. Unless if they're cooking from a church or some sort of donated space, um, or they can also that's also valid, right?
Yes. As
Okay,
long as they have some sort of agreement. I mean, we call it a leasing agreement, but if they just have like a written up agreement, even though the church might not even be charging them to use their facility, as long as we see an agreement and a copy of the certificate of occupancy, they can fulfill the licensing requirements.
perfect. Okay, this is awesome. Thank you for answering all of our questions. If you registered for this workshop, you will get a copy of the presentation and a link to rewatch the video if you wish. And if you didn't and you have questions, you can always reach out to us and you can reach out to DCRA. Um, I did get a lot of questions that were specific to what type of corporate entity um, people should be, and I'll follow up with you guys individually to connect you to legal services, and I can also refer you to a workshop we did on legal questions for entrepreneurs, where Tika Thomas, which is an attorney, goes over the different types, the benefits, and of course at the end of the day you have to make that decision with proper counsel. So we'll be happy to connect you as well. Thank you, Claudia, for all your work, for all your service. I think people like you make me happy to pay taxes. because the work you do to support entrepreneurs and small business is tremendous. And I know that a lot of love goes into it. So thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. Please always feel free to reach out. I do answer my phone and I do answer my emails.
Awesome. Thank you so, so, so much. I appreciate you. And thank you everyone for tuning in. If you have
Thank
additional
you.
questions, do reach out.
Thank you guys, and please stay safe.
Bye.
Bye.
Callie, I'm going to end the live stream.